I got it now. Yeah, I'm not used to being on television.
You're not. There's no tape in it.
No, there's no tape. All right. The Murphys had just rented a little house, and it was down by the railroad. And this morning, the landlord was paying a courtesy call to the house and wanted to know how they were making out. And Murphy wasn't home, so when the knock came to the door, Mrs. Murphy opened the door, and it was the landlord. So she invited him in, and he wanted to know how she liked the house. She says, the house is really fine, I love it, but she says, when a train goes by, it almost shakes the house down. She says, in fact, sometimes when I'm in bed and the train goes by, it almost throws me out of bed. He says, a train will be coming soon, come here, and I'll show you. So she laid down in the bed, and she says to the landlord, here, lay down beside me and see for yourself. And with that, Murphy came home. So when he walked in, he looked at him, he says, what the devil's going on here? And the landlord said, Murphy, you'll never believe this, but we're waiting for a train. All right?
That was good.
You like that? Okay. And now, here's Bill.
You did good. That's good. Little how to get you started.
Yeah.
Once you get started.
That was a surprise.
Every Sunday.
Since Prissy the cat is bowing out, we'll start using you.
Oh, let's tell everybody about Al, how he just had his 88th birthday.
He had his 88th birthday, and
Oh, yeah.
oh,
Something else to say.
I wanted to thank everybody for last week for helping me celebrate my 50th birthday. Not that 100 years.
Tell him whose birthday it really was.
okay. All right, let's go. What we're going to do is actually two parts. We've been tracing the story of Jacob, and we've been reaching the conclusion and understanding that all of the people that we're talking about in the Bible actually never existed. And you can take that any way you want. You can run with it in any direction you want. Their existence is meaningless anyhow. People that existed thousands of years ago, it's irrelevant to you, and if they did. But I see too much evidence of the allegory and the myth involved in all of this. And so I've reached the conclusion in my own heart that these people did not exist. But the stories that are made up about them do exist because they exist inside of you. So each one of the people then defined in this Bible as an individual is actually a part of you, a part of your mind, a part of your spirit, a part of your ego, a part of your personality, a part of the thought patterns that exist within you. And we've been following the adventures of Jacob. And if you remember, we reached the point, and if you'll open the Bible, we reached the point in this person's existence, which is actually you, of coming to grips with oneself. I'm not going to go back through all the stories because we have all the tapes, but all of the adventures were actually your adventures. Your adventures of trying to deceive the system, your adventures of trying to deceive authority, your adventures of trying to get what you can, and so forth and so on. And then your adventure finally reached the point where you realize, I've got to get back and I've got to settle this thing with myself. I've got to come back into a union with myself. I've got to bring peace inside of myself. I've got to bring some kind of sanity. I've got to bring some kind of balance into my life. And so the story has Jacob then making a U-turn through all of these wild things that he's involved in and heading back to the father's house. And remember, he's married to Rachel. And that word means you. Not U-Y-O-U, it means U-E-W-E, which is a female sheep, which means the feminine principle of spiritual thought. And she is barren. All of the women in the Bible who have children, who are the children of promise, whether they be the Isaac or the Jacob or the John the Baptist or the Samson or the Jesus, they're all virgin or barren, and Rachel is no exception. And she delivers, I told the folks in New York last night, a very famous child who has his own Broadway show now called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. She delivers Joseph. And Joseph becomes a critical part of your life because Joseph, as we go into the story, starts to assume that Christ consciousness within each one of us. But here's the point. Jacob is with Rachel. Jacob's with Leah. Jacob's got everything. But he's now making a U-turn and he's heading back to the father, Isaac. This is a point when you finally come to grips with that aspect of life that says, I cannot possibly make this on my own. I cannot possibly sort out all of these struggles. I cannot possibly sort out all of these things that life has thrown at me. I've got to get back inside of myself. I've got to find myself. I've got to come to grips with myself. Something has to make sense out of this. But there's a problem here. On his way back to the father's house, there is Esau, his brother, so the story goes, who he tricked. Now, Esau represents the physical part of you, a very important part, but nonetheless a completely different part than the Jacob spiritual part. And you're always contending with that. You're constantly contending with the physical part that wants to go this way, the spiritual part that wants to go this way, and basically the job is to bring a harmony so they start flowing both in the same direction. The physical will always have its thing to do, and it's very important. The spiritual will always have its thing to do, and it's very important. But at this point in the lives of many people, they're totally separated from one another. In fact, there's an animosity between the two. Okay. And so we get to this point now where Jacob has started to make this U-turn, heading back to the father's house. You've started to come to grips with the fact that you've got to renew something in your mind if you're going to find some kind of sanity in your life. But between you and the father is this physical part, which is Esau. And remember now, Esau is coming, according to the allegory of the story, after Jacob with 400 men, and he's going to kill Jacob and all of these things. Take it back to page 28 in the Bible and look at Genesis chapter 32. Because last week came that part in the life of Jacob, which is the most dramatic and exhilarating and exciting part in the life of each one of us. That part that has to occur if we're going to make sense out of this life. That part that has to occur if we're going to make any sense out of our families, any sense out of our future, if you have a future. I mean, basically, you know, as you look, you know, let me just show you how stupid we are, how thick we are, how unknowing and uncaring we are. I was watching a program last night. I don't know if any of you might have seen it. It was on the, I believe it was the Discovery Channel, called The People of the Forest, and it was about chimpanzees. Okay? There is a chimpanzee. You talk about the capacity to love, the capacity to understand, the capacity to feel, the capacity to be what we think is human and caring. And there's a story about this chimpanzee who had a little baby chimpanzee called Flint. And they're showing you these pictures. And anyhow, to make a long story short, Flint loves his mother. This baby chimpanzee loves the mother. And the mother dies. And Flint stays with her dead body. And all of the other chimpanzees start moving away as they migrate to a different part of the jungle of the forest. Here is this little baby chimpanzee. He wouldn't leave. He stayed with his dead mother's body and then stayed in the nest for 3 weeks and died of a broken heart. A little chimp. See? And so it's something that moves through everything that lives. And that's why we've never understood that. That's why Christianity is such a flop, because it knows nothing but a book. It knows nothing but buildings. It doesn't know anything about chimpanzees. It doesn't know anything about dolphins. It doesn't know anything about love. It doesn't know anything about the true essence. All of the love is built around doctrines of religion that they've made up. But the real essence of this thing is that there is a struggle within the mind of every person, and you've got to come to grips with it. And how does Jacob and how do you come to grips with this struggle and start to turn life around so that you can make some sense out of it? Genesis chapter 32 on page 28. And if you go to verse 23, it says, he took them. In other words, he took everything that he had and he sent it over to the other side. Every thought, every idea, every dream, every big shot scheme that you've got in your head has got to be flushed out. And I'll tell you why it has to be flushed out. Because Rachel and Rebecca and Sarah and Elizabeth and Mary and all of these figures in the Bible who are nothing more than aspects of your life, none of them can have that womb opened by anything that you can do. None of them can be impregnated by you. They can only be impregnated by God. The rose that comes on the vine cannot be opened by you or me. It can only be opened by God. The womb that produces the child of promise within inside of the minds of each one of us can never be opened by you and me. It can only be opened by God. It's off limits to you and me, you say. And so then something has to be done inside of our heads, inside of our minds, if we're going to be equipped and ready to receive this magnificence of nature. And so it says he sent everything that he had over to the other side. In other words, every bit of his ego was broken. Every bit of his ego was gone. Every bit of your ego is broken and gone when you sit in meditation. And then it says, and Jacob was left alone and he wrestled with a man. In other words, he wrestled with himself. He had to come to grips with himself. It says his thigh was put out, which means finally, when all of the desires of his heart were gone and he was willing to flow in that nirvanic sea of nothingness, then he says his name was changed to Israel. He had finally overcome. Israel is the name of three Egyptian gods, Is, Ra, and El, the spirit, the mind, the power within. When the spirit within you comes to grips with the mind within you, then you become El, the power within you. That's where that word angel comes from. It's the power within. There are no such things as angels. Do you know that there are no such things as invisible people floating around guiding you? These are electronic impulses inside of you that when you learn to use them, and they call all of the angels by a name that ends in El, Uriel, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, all of this kind of business. It's talking about a natural impulse that's inside of you. And so Jacob comes to that place. And it says in Genesis chapter 32, right where you are, in verse 30, he says he realizes, I have seen God face to face, and I shall call the place Peniel, which means seeing the face of God, which actually is another word or way of describing or pronouncing the word, which is the pineal gland of the brain. He activated the single eye, and he saw God face to face. He overcame that which was all of this horror in his meditation. That's what it's talking about. It means that you must activate the pineal gland of your brain. That way you see that which we call God face to face inside of your mind, and you overcome. That's what the story is. But he's still got to get back to the mind. He's still got to get back to the Father. He's still got Esau in the middle here with 400 men, according to the story. And those 400 men symbolize the fourfold nature of physical, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional. And that's what's standing between you. But now, it's no longer a question of this here killing. It's no longer a question of the fear. It's no longer a question that you have a fear of yourself, because it says here, now Jacob turns his face towards Esau, and they're coming right at each other. In other words, the spiritual nature in you is about ready to make things right with the physical nature in you. Having raised ourselves at the Peniel, receiving the identity of this thing called Israel, we're now ready to return to the Father's house. We're now ready to bring some sanity within ourselves. And you know what this all means? For God's sakes, tell everybody in your family, tell everybody, the police, tell the government, tell the president, tell the Congress to shut up and go into a closet somewhere and come to grips with yourself. Because everybody is a form of a lunatic. Everybody is a lunatic. And when you go and ask advice, you are one lunatic going to another lunatic. Including me. You're going to come and ask me? Okay. So here is the point where you have finally come and you've got an answer from within yourself, and you start to move out. It says on page 29 in Genesis chapter 33, Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold Esau. Here's Esau! Jake. I owe you, Jake. They finally come to grips with one another. Come here, Jake. 400 guys. Jake's got a bag full of women and goats and cows. But you know something? He's coming up against the biggest piece of trouble ever. Just what you come against. Esau that's standing there, and Jake, if you're a teenager, it might be a report card. It might be a teacher. It might be a counselor. Or it might be a husband or a wife. It might be the judge where you got to go to court next week. Whatever it is, there's an Esau waiting for you. And Esau is saying, come here. But Jake says, here I am. Because something has happened inside of him that has driven the fear away. Now, it's not a fact that he wants necessarily to face this, but there is something now that's within inside that he knows this has to come out right. It has to come out right. It's going to come out right. No matter how bad it looks, it's going to come out. Look at you sitting in this room. How old are you? Look at all of the Esau's that have faced you in your life, and here you are. Every single one of them you overcame. But you know what? The fear has taken its toll. And sometimes the fear takes its toll as disease. Sometimes the fear takes its toll in depressions, whatever it may be. So anyhow, Jacob sees Esau coming. Now I want you to see something here, and this is the beautiful part. You see, when these people write allegory, you don't have to know how to write allegory. You have to know how to read Eastern mysticism. These people took everything that is normal, everything that is understandable, and place it deep into a spiritual realm behind the words. Just like, and you do it too. You say, come on, I want you to come over tomorrow. Let's just shoot the bull together, because I want to tell you about Lucy. This woman's off the wall, and I mean, she's just freaking out. You know, she spilled the beans all over. And it's the way you're talking. You're talking in all of these deep hidden meanings. You convey in this coded language, you know. Oh, what'd you think about Jerry? Well, boy, he really shot his mouth off, didn't he? You know. And all of these things that you use to express yourself are all hidden meanings. That's the way these people wrote. See, now the most magnificent thing here is to recognize Rachel as the deep spirit, that virgin womb that produces Joseph, which is the child of promise within you. That is the most important part of you. That's the part of you that no matter how you try, you can't open that womb. No matter how you try, you can't do anything to make her produce that child. Do you understand what I'm talking about? It's off limits to you. The only one that can intercourse with Rachel is God. And the only time that God will intercourse with Rachel is when you allow it. So forget about it. Forget about people telling you this is the way or that is the way. Oh, they can show you, oh, this is how you sit and this is how you can get started. But once you get started, then you'll have to just allow Rachel to be touched by God. And Joseph is the coat of many colors. Joseph is the child of promise within you, who will then replace the wounded child. And I want you to notice something. Look in Genesis chapter 33. Look at verse 2. Jacob is setting everybody up because they're going to come up against Esau. And he says, and he took the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindmost. Okay? Rachel and Joseph hindmost. Deep within the mind at the right side. Beyond the touch of all of your insanity, beyond the touch of all of your struggles, beyond the touch of all of your desires and your thoughts, there is this woman. There is this barren spirit, and there is this child who with promise of the coat of many colors deep within you at the center of your mind, off limits, untouchable by anything from the outside. Now, Genesis chapter 33:3. And Jacob passed over, and look what he did. He came to Esau, and when he came to Esau, it says he bowed down to Esau 7 times. How many? Read it. He bowed down 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7! Esau, I have overcome. See? The spiritual part has brought you to a point where you have touched and embraced and finally come to understand yourself. He bows to Esau 7 times because there are 7 chakras. In the book of life in the Bible says it rises up the backside and touches that which is the pineal gland and throws open the right side. But it must pass through the 7 seals. He bows down 7 times. In Genesis 33:4, here's the communion. It says, look at Genesis 33:4. After all of this, Esau ran to meet him and embraced Jacob and hugged his neck. The neck, metaphysically, in the ancient writings, is the bridge between the body and the spirit. Everything rises up the spine, right up through the spinal cord, past through the neck, up into the brain. And he hugged his neck, just like in the story of the prodigal son, he hugged his neck. It says in the ancient Egyptian studies that it says that my neck is the neck of the divine goddess Isis. So there's it. See, everything is done for a purpose. Hey, look what has happened. I now am in control of myself. I may not be that hotsy-totsy, but I'm starting to be a movement. I mean, there's starting to be an understanding that I've got to have a balance. I can't be all spiritual like they want to do in religion. I can't be. That's stupid. It's sick. It's not right. I can't be all physical. I've got to be a balance. Esau and Jacob have to hug one another. Don't you understand what that means? That your physical activities are just as important as your spiritual activities. Somebody that's all spiritual is a fakakta. Somebody that's all... Do you know what that word? You know it's a Jewish word, incidentally. That means it's a lot of junk. You know, it's stupid. Do you know what that means? Some people think. You, the teacher. Okay. Do you realize once this beautiful thing takes place, now there's a communion between the two of you? And what does it mean? Does it mean you're going to sit down all the time and you want to come to meditation? Because you're not going to want to come to meditation because your physical part, Esau, is going to want to go to Atlantic City. Esau is saying, hey, I hugged your neck, but enough is enough. You know what I mean? I don't want to get in bed with you. I want to go to Atlantic City. And so the Jacob part's going to say we should go to meditation. And sometimes Esau will win, sometimes Jacob will win. But there's an awareness within you now that there is a part. Do you know that even whether you're 16 years old or whether you're 88 years old or whether you're 62 or 35 or 45, that many of you up to this time didn't even know that Jacob and Esau existed inside of you, but they do. And they both have to have a piece of the action. Look what it says. Genesis 35, verse 19. Jacob and Esau exchange gifts. There's a harmony between the both sides. But there's something important here. Very important. This is something that you've got to understand. There's a harmony now between your physical and spiritual side. But, Genesis 33, verse 16. Esau 15, Esau says, well, I'm going to leave. And so Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth. The physical part of your life has a job to do over there, and the spiritual part of your life has a job to do over here. And never, ever will they come together, because their jobs in your life are completely different. I hear these songs, we are one in the Spirit, we are one with the Lord, we are one in the Spirit, until you get out of church and you get home. And then Esau wakes up and all hell breaks loose, and that one that was one in the Spirit a minute ago is throwing shoes up against the wall and throwing things and throwing people out the back door and saying, get out of here, I hate you, and all of this stuff. What happened? We are one in the Spirit. Doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You're a human being. And Esau will have his time, and that's fine. As long as when Esau has his time, you realize that you got to give time to Jake. You got to give time to Rachel. And so they leave, and you know what? Where did Esau go? That part of you that is the physical went to Seir. You know what Seir means? Rough. Rough. And if you think it's not rough, wait till this week comes. And then you find out. Not only is Esau going to Seir, not only is Esau going to have a rough time, you're going with him. Mary, you're going. It's going to be rough. Renee, it has been rough. Huh? It's been rough. And if you could say it's not been rough, it's been rough. Because that's where Esau takes you. That's the physical part. That's the rough part. And where does Jake go? Jake goes to Succoth, which means the tents of the daughters. And the daughters mean the desires of the Spirit. Jake takes you to the dwelling places of spiritual desires in your meditation. But Esau, when you get done fulfilling your time in the tents of spiritual desires, Esau says, come on, Joe, let's go where it's rough. And Joe will say, I'm glad this week was over, man. It was rough. But you know it. It's the way it is. And you know what the funny thing is? You wouldn't have it any other way. You wouldn't have it any other way because you'd start to get bored. And so there they go. Harmony begins to reign between the physical and the spiritual as long as they go in different directions. But don't try to live a spiritual life because you'll never be able to do it. But many of us have tried to live a physical life and found out it didn't work either. There's got to be a harmony between the two. The movement of energy that had begun with the deceiving of the mind culminates with the inner struggle, the activation of the pineal gland, and all this means is you finally have come to the understanding that you have a left side and a right side, and both of them need your attention. And it says in Genesis chapter 33, verse 18, Jacob came to Shalom. Do you know what Shalom means? Perfect. 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 Look at, go to page 979 in the Bible for just a minute. 979. The second part of this, and then fasten down your seatbelts for the second part of this message because it's a doozer. It's one you've never heard in church before and you never will. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 1, Paul says, leaving the principles of the doctrines of Christ, let us go on to perfection. Oh, you say, I can't be perfect. No, you can't, but Rachel can. And Rachel's inside of you. Go on. How am I going to do that? You're going to do it by shutting up and shutting down. Shut your mouth and shut your thoughts. Shut your eyes. Sit down and shut up. Be still. And when you're still and when you've disciplined yourself and when you've practiced that, and even when you listen to the wacky sounds that come out of gongs and bells and sound, all of a sudden, one moment, you'll be in perfection. You'll fly away from yourself, and yourself will be gone, and all your thoughts will be gone, and all of your worries will be gone, and all of those things that you're spending all of your day driving yourself nuts. It's all gone, and when everything is gone, you're in perfection. And that's what Paul says, go on to perfection. Jesus Christ himself said, hey, be perfect. Abraham was instructed to be perfect. But when you touch the pineal gland in the brain, perfection sets into your mind. It doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect outside because Esau is with you and you'll always screw up. We screw up all the time. But it means that you have a point where even when you're screwing up and even when things are very, very rough, you can run to that place of perfection. And even if you spend, remember what I loved, who was it with in Camelot? What was his name? Richard Burton, when he sang, for one brief shining moment, there's a place called Camelot. And that's what you got to find. Find Camelot. It's inside of yourself. Be in there for one brief shining moment. And in that one brief shining moment, that thing which you call God can talk to you and speak to you. For one brief shining moment. And then it says in Genesis chapter 33, verse 20, he names the place El Elohe Israel, the mighty one, the mighty God of Israel. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with Israel. It has nothing whatsoever to do with God. It has nothing ever whatsoever to do with... It's talking about that mighty one, that part of you that is special, that part of you that people have been putting down all of your life. There is something inside of yourself that everybody has looked at in one way or another. It might be a husband, it might be a wife, it might be a mother or a father, it might be a teacher, it might be a cop, it might be a president or a politician. Somebody has tried to put you down somewhere through your life. They have wounded the child, but they says there's a mighty one inside of you, and that mighty one inside of you is born out of the virgin womb of the divine spirit that we call Rachel. You want to call it Jesus, I could care less. You want to call it Hare Krishna, I could care less. You want to call it Buddha, you want to call it Muhammad, they're all the same person with a different name. It's all the same. But what it means is inside of you, if you'll only shut your face for just a minute and listen deep within yourself, inside there is a rose upon a vine, and when you will allow it and allow spring to come, don't you understand what's going on? There is a winter in your life. There is snow in your life. There is ice in your life. There is a coldness inside of you, and the flowers don't bloom when it's cold, and the flowers don't blossom when it's cold, and so you've got to allow the sun, which is in the solar plexus of the lower part of you, to rise up into the higher part, to the pineal gland, and when that happens, springtime comes because it sits at the right side. When the sun sits at the right side in the northern hemisphere, springtime comes. When the energy sits at the right side of the right hemisphere of the brain inside of you, springtime comes to your life. And when springtime comes inside of you, the flower opens. Then the change comes. The mighty one has come. And that basically is Jacob. And that basically is you. And that basically is me. And now we come to another story, which is called rape. The rape of the virgin. You know what the story is you're going to read in the Bible? There's a beautiful young girl named Dinah. And Dinah is a virgin. And she's raped by these people. So these people say, "Ah, yeah, but, she was really something. I want to marry her." So they go to these Israels. The Israels say, "You want to marry her? Oh, yeah? Yeah, we want to be friends with you." "Oh, you do, huh? Yeah, good. I tell you what, when all you guys get circumcised, everybody gets circumcised, and we'll let you marry sweet Dinah." Okay. Get out the knife. Get in line, fellas. We're going to have a little service. Chip, chip, snip, snip, chop, chop, pop, pop. And they're all sitting around. 3 days later, things are getting very sore south of the border. Yeah. And the boys from Israel say, "Now's the time. Charge! Boom!" And they come storming down into the camp, and there's not one of these guys that can get up. They kill them all. This is the Bible. God's chosen people, the Word of God. Everybody gets circumcised, and then you attack. Huh? Okay, you see? Look at, go to page 29, Genesis chapter 34. Verse 1, Dinah goes out to see the daughters of the land, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, saw her, he took her, laid with her, and defiled her. This guy raped Dinah. You know what he's doing? He's attacking the virgin. He's coming against the holy place. It's when you come against the holy place within yourself. Do you know what this story is about? It has nothing to do with people getting circumcised. It has nothing to do with people raping anybody. It has nothing to do with sex. It's talking about you when you come in a physical attack against yourself, against the holy part within you. And do you know how you attack yourself and the holy part within you? It's called probably one of the most diabolical words ever constructed in the history of mankind. It's called religion. Because you don't know anything about the virgin. You don't know anything about that which is within the mind. And you attack it. Well, it says that he raped her. And that says in Genesis 34:4, right there, as Shechem said to his father, "Get me this damsel for my wife." In other words, I want to marry. Do you know what you just said? I want to marry the Spirit. Do you know what I'm telling you? You can't marry the Spirit. The Spirit's off limits to you. That's the worst part of religion. It is the worst part of people who think they're going to have a spiritual relationship. You cannot have. There is a spirit in you, and if you'll allow it, God will intercourse with that spirit. You can't touch it. It's off limits to you. But here, this one's already raped it. And do you know what Jesus Christ says in the Bible? People try to take heaven by force. Hey, you want to get religious? Let's sing the song. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. And the Spirit of God is in this place. I feel the movement of God. I feel God is moving all over this place. All over this place, God isn't moving. Your emotions are moving. You have just attacked that which is the virgin. You have just attacked that which is spiritual. You have just raped that which is the virgin. Look at page 786 and see what I'm talking about. It says in Matthew chapter 11, and verse 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. What happened to this girl, Dinah? Somebody took her by force. The virgin was raped. The virgin was defiled by force. And so it says, go back to page 29 where you are, in Genesis chapter 34 and verse 8, Hamor communed with them saying, "The soul of my son longs for your daughter." In other words, he's coming, and here's this within inside of yourself. Do you know what happens when you long for the daughter? This is the point where you want to get spiritual, but you don't know how to get spiritual. This is the point when you want to get spiritual, you want to find the truth within yourself, and you try to find it through every type of religious doctrine or religious exercise or religious emotionalism you can find, because you don't know how, but you want to. So Shechem goes on that the families will exchange daughters. We're going to live happily ever after. You can't live happily ever after. The physical part of you can't live happily ever after. What happened? Esau went that way. Jake went that way. Because inside of you is Abel, but inside of you is Cain. Inside of you is Abraham, but inside of you is Lot. Inside of you is Isaac, but inside of you is Ishmael. Inside of you is Jacob, but inside of you is Esau. Inside of you is Adam and Eve, and inside of you is the serpent. Inside of you is brightness, inside of you is darkness, and it cannot coexist. There has to be balance given to each. It can't be one. And this is allegory describing those two parts of the mind that cannot coexist. And the one comes after the other violently. And what have you got to do? You know what's being discussed here? You know what it was that raped the virgin? Your thoughts. The people of Shechem are thoughts. That's what's all being talked about here. And what do you have to do with your thoughts? What do you have to do with your mind? I want everybody here to open this up. I want you to see it with your own eyes. And I'm talking about the meditation time. I'm talking about the Jacob time when he touches the pineal gland of the brain. I'm talking about that time when you finally get away from everything that's frightened you. When you finally get away from everything that has made you feel guilty. When you finally get away from everything that has made you feel depressed. How do you do that? I want you to open to 946. And maybe you can, page 946, and maybe you could take this even out of the Bible somewhere and stick it on a refrigerator or put it somewhere so that you finally understand what's being described and what I've described to you in the beginning part of this message and what's being described here. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 6, and it's verse 17, and it says, "Wherefore come out from among them." Among who? Your thoughts. "And be separate, says the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." I'll tell you, and I've talked to them, I can tell you that most religious people have never separated from the unclean thing, which is the mind. And they're told by their pastors in their church, don't do that. You'll get into the occult. So they stay with the dirty, filthy thing that has caused them fear and guilt and stress, and they stay there and they play religion, and they pretend that they've got the virgin. They've got nothing. They've raped the virgin in their mind. They have never separated from the unclean thing. And the unclean thing is that thing which makes you feel guilty and makes you feel distressed and makes you fear. And many of you have never come out from it. And you say, well, I got to get to sleep. I got to rest. And you go to sleep, and then you turn it over completely to the mind. Because when you go to sleep, your mind wakes up and runs wild. And the only time that you can turn that thing off and come out and separate from it is when you deliberately shut it down in your meditation. You say, turn it off, pull the plug, it's over. It's simply called you taking control of your mind instead of your mind taking control of you. So deceit starts again. Go back to page 29, Genesis 34:13, and here are the sons of Jacob, and they're going to practice deceit. Remember what we're talking about. The sons of Jacob are your divine spiritual thoughts. The men of Shechem who have raped the virgin are your carnal thoughts, and so you've got to be deceitful. And it says in Genesis chapter 34, verse 13, it says, and the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully. You have to deceive your mind in order to shut it off. You have to deceive your thoughts in order to shut it off. You know what we did last week? I know, it was the week before we did a meditation here on a Sunday night was Jonathan Living Seagull with Neil Diamond. And I thought to myself, gee, I don't know how this is going to work because I've never gone into a meditation where there were words before. Usually it's om or bells or music or silence where you try to escape from these thoughts. But it was so beautiful because the words that Neil Diamond wrote are just very short but very beautiful. Dear Father, we dream, we dream. And I could listen to his thoughts, and his thoughts took me away from my thoughts. And then the music came and I soared with these gulls out over a cliff, out over the ocean, up into nirvana, and it works beautifully. It worked beautifully. So we've got to somehow deceive our mind. And if it means you listen to a gong, your mind is going to say, what the hell is that? Bong! What is that? Bing, bling, ding, 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 ding. What is that? I want to hear thoughts. I want to hear plotting. I want to hear conniving. I want to hear planning. Come on, Lorraine, what are you going to do next week? Hey, I'm going to figure your way. I want to hear what's going to happen to you. See, I want to hear. That's what my mind is used to hearing. Come on, Joe. What are you going to do? How are you going to get out of this one, Joe? Come on, we're going to get in trouble. Oh, boy. Wait till the doctor's report comes back. The blood test will be back next week, Judy. Next week, the blood test. No, nothing to worry about, Judy, right? The blood test is coming back, Judy. Nothing to worry about, huh? Yes, there is. Because Esau's going to tell you everything's to worry about, Judy. Whatever it is, you got it. And so, I'll figure this out. I'll open my physician's desk reference and see what this is. I got all of these things. Your mind goes crazy. And so you've got to deceive it, and you deceive it in your meditation by going home. You deceive it with a mantra. You deceive it with the music or the bells or whatever you're listening to. You deceive it. And so what do they do here? It says they deceived the thoughts. It says, Virgin Dinah will be impregnated by God, and the child will be born. But look, folks, this is what's being said here. In order for this to happen, the flesh, which means the thoughts of the left side, must die. They cannot coexist. Huh? They've got to die. They cannot coexist. So what happens? How do you kill your thoughts? What is the reason? What's the Bible say? Listen to me very carefully. We've got about 5 minutes more, and all this is going to be wrapped up in this, but it's going to be good, okay? Look at this. Genesis 34, verse 15. We're going to consent to this, Israel says. If you'll be as we, that means every male be circumcised. Why? Why'd they tell them that? Because they want to kill them. Your thoughts must be circumcised. Do you know what I mean? Circumcision means cutting away of the outer desire. It is of the male sexual organ, which is a symbol of desire, and the cutting away is the cutting away of desire. See? When the desire to have things your way, to have things the way that you're going to dominate is cut away, then those thoughts will die. You see that? So the story goes, okay, this is what you got to do. Genesis 34, verses 22 and 23 says, wait a minute. If every male among us be circumcised, okay, let's do it. In other words, once your lower thoughts consent to the circumcision, once the desires are cut away, and you do that by, do you know what? When you go, there's not one desire, there's not one thought. When you get into silence above the mind, once those thoughts are cut away, then what happens? You go into meditation, your initial feelings are going away, the circumcision is taking place, okay? And then Genesis 34, verse 25 says, and it came to pass on the third day. What's that mean? It's going to be new life, the third day. Why does the third day mean new life? Does anybody know why the third day means new life? Why was Jesus in the tomb 3 days and it meant new life? Why is Jonah in the whale 3 days and it means new life? Because the sun on December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th is in the bowels of the earth for 3 days, and on December the 25th, it rises to new life, and it resurrects itself to come into the point where we are just about getting close to being right now. Springtime, new life. 3 days and 3 nights. So this is going to be new life. How is it going to be new life? It came to pass on the third day when they were sore. You want to go to the stoning tonight, Chuckum? I ain't going anywhere. I mean, who agreed to this? So they're sore, and they're hurting, and it says on the third day, hey, I'm reading you the Bible. I'm making this up. Do you know something? I can tell you something. I could show you stories in this Bible that you would be more comfortable with your kids reading Playboy. I'm telling you, it's probably one of the most violent, brutal, sexually motivated books that's ever been written. But for a purpose. It says in verse 25, came to pass in the third day when they were sore that the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city and slew all the males. In other words, when you have cut away all the desires of your mind, it is at that point that all of those thoughts which have caused you so much grief can be cut away. It can't happen any other way. The reason why do I teach this? Because this is what Jesus taught. The kingdom of God is within you. Take no thought. Why do I teach it? Because I have sat for and watched and read about 2,000 years of people killing children, 2,000 years of people killing animals, 2,000 years of people pillaging nature, 2,000 years of people being put down, 2,000 years of women being degraded, 2,000 years of minorities being put into hovels, 2,000 years of people building beautiful churches all over in poverty-stricken places while the people live in huts and shacks and everything because they could care less about themselves. They only care about their religion and holding on to control over people's lives. And this, if you will understand this, and if you will allow the desires of your heart to be cut away in meditation, and that fleshly idea would die within you, then you'll be set free. That's why. Then you'll become Jacob. Then Rachel inside of you will give birth to Joseph. Because what you're carting around and all of the guilt and all of the hurt and all of the fear that you're carting around with you all of your life is the wounded child within you. And any psychiatrist or psychologist can tell you about the wounded child. And there is another child within you who is Joseph, who is ready to be born of Rachel, who is Jesus, who is ready to be born of Mary. And if you'll allow it, that child will be born within you, and the government will be upon that child's shoulders, and it will be taken off of your back. But you have to understand these things. These people did not write Bible stories for squeamish people. They didn't write Bible stories for those who get insulted, or those who get mad, or those whose traditions are offended. They wrote Bible stories for people who had learned how to deal with themselves and how to set themselves free and how to start being compassionate about children, how to start being compassionate about women, how to start being compassionate about minority people, how to start being compassionate about animals, and how to start being compassionate about nature. Everything that religion knows nothing of. That's why they wrote the story. And the only way all of those compassions can happen is when you're willing to submit to the circumcision of your thoughts, allow those fleshly ideas to die, and be sent upward into the arms of the Holy Mother and Father God, and be set free. So? And then it says in Genesis 34:30 that Jacob became fearful that the Shechemites would come against him, but there's nothing to fear, for the virgin brings forth the death of the lower and sets the higher free. So what do you do? The story is the story. You want to believe somebody raped somebody and somebody got circumcised, then go ahead. You want to believe that Adam and Eve didn't know they had clothes on until a talking snake told them? Go ahead. It's fine. Or do you want to grow up and start understanding that what you've got in your hand is a book of divine cosmic psychology telling you how you work and how the universe has to work? I choose to. And I choose to see because I have seen so many of you who have walked through the door, and so many when they have first heard the things that I have said would resent or get mad at me because of what I've told you. But remember, I didn't make up these stories. I read these stories to you from the Bible. And they're tough. They're very adult stories because it is expected that those people who look for a spiritual walk in life are adult people and ready to grow up. But you know what we've done? We haven't accepted these stories as grown-ups. We believe that there are talking snakes. We believe that people swallowed by fish live in the fish's stomach for 3 days. It's the way we don't want it any more deeper than that. Because once you find out that those things are not true, then you start to realize that what is true is your responsibility to come to grips with yourself. You've been told all about Jacob inside of yourself, and you've let Esau run like crazy. And now you've come to the point which says, hey, you got to get a balance in your life. And the only way you can get a balance in your life is by obeying Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ said, the kingdom is within you, seek it. The kingdom is within you, separate from thought. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that for about 3 minutes now. One of the most beautiful